Hello Year 5 and welcome to your reading lesson for today. Now before we start and look at our skills for today, we are going to do some retrieval practice. Now this is going to require you to remember some of the vocabulary that you've learnt in this book so far. So your first question I would like you to have a go at is, can you use the word incredulously in a sentence? And can you tell me a definition for the word scornfully? Okay, so pause the video and jot down your answers. Okay, so we know that incredulously means to almost be very shocked and in disbelief and utter amazement at something. So here's my sentence. How on earth did you manage that? She cried incredulously. So anything that's relating to someone or a statement where they're in absolute disbelief and shock and awe at something, then well done for doing that sentence correctly. Now, can you tell me a definition of the word scornfully? So we came across this in chapter 2. Now, to be scornful or to address someone scornfully means to talk to them or address them with a form of in a disrespectful or disliking manner. Okay, so it's when we're not particularly happy or pleased with someone and we're quite rude. We might be very abrupt with them. We might not like them. And that comes across in the way that we speak to them sometimes. So well done if you've remembered those two words, because those were two quite of our big words for the beginning of our book. So for today, we are going to be looking at inferring information about a character or a setting. Okay, so by the end of the lesson, you need to be successful in being able to identify what it means to infer meaning or understanding from the text. You also need to be able to read around the text to find evidence. Now, we do this in all of our reading lessons, but it's really important for inference because it's all about reading between the lines. And you need to be able to differentiate between what is a fact statement and what is an opinion statement. So we'll be looking at that last part of our success criteria towards the end of our lesson. So let's kick off our lesson today with some vocabulary. And I'm struggling to find some words I think you might struggle with, but I think I found some good ones in the last few days. So if you have a look at the pages in front of you, or we'll have a look at the pages when we read through our video in a minute. On page 31, aren't exactly inconspicuous. The full sentence is, dragons aren't exactly inconspicuous, are they? So the word we're going to focus on is inconspicuous. Okay, now it's 5 syllables. Okay, it's a long word. So conspicuous. Okay, so it is an adjective, so it's a word that we are describing with. We're describing that dragons are inconspicuous. Now it means to not be clearly visible and to not attract attention. So you imagine that maybe your brother and sister has come out of the kitchen and you think they've been up to something, so you're suspicious, one of our other words, and they're not being particularly subtle about what they've been doing in the kitchen. And maybe you know that they've maybe taken some chocolate or eaten some chocolate cakes. They might have chocolate frosting or crumbs all around their face. Now that means that it's actually very visible and it's very obvious. Okay, so when you are being inconspicuous, that means that you're actually not being very, good at hiding it from somebody. So for example, the toddler made a rather inconspicuous pen mark on the white walls. Now, for it to be an inconspicuous pen mark, that means it's really obvious. Like we can see that, okay? So when you're trying to be inconspicuous, or you're trying to be conspicuous, you're being discreet, okay? Or trying to be invisible, or be unseen, or do something in an unnoticeable way. So the antonyms for that would be if something was very obvious or very visible, okay? Or it would be eye-catching, okay? So that's one of the words we're going to look at in our books today. We're also going to be looking at this word. So on page 33, it said that the rain makes dragons melancholy. So we're going to be looking at the word melancholy, okay? So this is, so when we describe someone as being melancholy as an adjective. Okay, I realise I've missed that off my slide. So being melancholy is what we have as an adjective, and it's 4 syllables, melancholy. Okay, melancholy. And we use it to suggest that someone is in a sad state of mind, but sometimes it's a feeling that can be quite long lasting. So if you imagine that, so for example, in this sentence, let's have a look at the sentence I've written here to help us. So Charlotte was melancholy after saying goodbye to her pet goldfish. Now, sometimes when a pet or an animal or someone dies, that feeling of being sad lasts a little bit longer than just a moment. And sometimes if you describe someone as being melancholy, and it might be something that's part of their personality, you might say that they could be depressed. So it's almost that long-term feeling of feeling unhappy. So if we have a look at our synonyms, you could be gloomy, you could be sorrowful, Charlotte could be mournful, or she could be downcast. So it's all about referring to someone as being quite unhappy and not okay. Now, obviously, to be the opposite of unhappy is to be happy and to be very cheerful, very bright, very joyful, and be the opposite of being in that sad state of mind where you're then in a happy state of mind. So those are the two words that we are going to be looking at today. So we've got inconspicuous and we have melancholy. Now, as normal, if you would like to pause the video and you would like to read it yourself, by all means, please pause the video. If you haven't printed off the worksheets at home, that's fine, because I have made sure that on every lesson, the pictures of the book's chapter pages are always going to be on this screen. So you can always go back and skip through the video so that you can find where the chapter pages are that we are reading. So if you want to carry on reading for yourself, then by all means, off you go. If not, then you can carry on watching and listen to my beautiful voice reading to you. Okay, I'm going to finish reading the line from the previous chapter page. So, the white rat nodded, looking pleased with himself. You've come to exactly the right person. I know all of the mountain ranges on this planet, large, small, and medium. I know everything about them. After all, my informants come from all over the world. Your informants? Asked Ben. Yes, ship's rats, seagulls, the sort of folk who get around a lot, and I have a large extended family. Greytail went over to a big black box standing on the desk, raised the lid and pushed a knob on its side. That's a real computer, said Ben, surprised. Of course it is. Greytail hit a couple of keys and looked at the screen, frowning. A laptop, all the bells and whistles. I sent off for it to help me get my files in some kind of order. But the fact is, he sighed, and he tried some more keys. The fact is, it's always giving me grief. Right, what mountain range was it you wanted? Well, said Sorrel, scratching her stomach. She was itching horribly under the human's clothes. It's supposed to be the highest there is. The highest mountain range in the world, with a chain of mountains somewhere in the middle of it called the Rim of Heaven. Ever heard of it? Oh, that one is it, the Rim of Heaven. Well, well. Greytail looked curiously at the brownie. The valley above the clouds, home of the dragons. Not so easy. He turned around and hammered busily away at the keyboard. The place isn't really thought to exist at all, you know, he said, but one hears odd things now and then. What's your interest in it? A brownie girl and a human boy. They say even the dragons have long since forgotten where the Rim of Heaven lies. Ben opened his mouth, but Sorrel gave him no time to speak. This human has nothing to do with it, she said. I'm on my way to find the Rim of Heaven with a dragon. A dragon? Gilbert Greytail looked at Sorrel in surprise. Where have you hidden this dragon, then? In an old factory, Ben answered, quickly before Sorrel could open her mouth. Not far away. He'll be safe there. No one's been in it in years. Aha! Gilbert nodded, his white head sagely. Well, what about it? Said Sorrel impatiently. Do you know where the Rim of Heaven is? Can you tell us how to get there in reasonable safety? One thing at a time, replied the rat, twirling his whiskers. Nobody knows where the Rim of Heaven lies. There are a few vague rumours about it, that's all. But the highest mountain range in the world is the Himalayas, no doubt of that. All the same, it won't be easy to find a safe route for a dragon to take. Dragons, he pointed out, chuckling, aren't exactly inconspicuous, know what I mean? And their horns and claws are in great demand. Quite apart from the fact that anyone setting up as a dragon slayer could be a big star on TV for weeks. I'll admit I wouldn't mind taking a look at your friend myself, but, he said, shaking his head as he turned back to the computer, but I never go further than down to the harbour. Far too risky for me with all those cats prowling about. And there's other dangers too, he added, rolling his eyes. Oh, you wouldn't believe the half of it. Dogs, great big clumsy human feet, rat poison. No, thank you very much. But I thought you'd been all over the world, said Sorrel in surprise. Rosa said you were a ship's rat. Gilbert tugged at his whiskers, looking embarrassed. Well, yes, I am. Learned the trade from my grandad. But I get seasick as soon as a boat casts off, even little rowing boats. On my first voyage, I jumped overboard while we were still in harbour, swam back to the bank, and never set paw on one of those swaying sardine cans again. Ah, he leaned so far forward that his sharp nose touched the screen. Here we are. The Himalayas, also known as the land of the eternal snows, roof of the world and all that. You've a long journey ahead of you, friends. Follow me. Paw over paw, Gilbert Greytail made his way along a cord stretched right across the room from the desk to the big globe. He sat at the top of the heavy wooden stand and kicked the globe with his hind paws. Squealing, it moved slightly, and Gilbert brought it to rest with his paw again. Well, now, he murmured, what have we here, then? Ben and Sorrel looked inquiringly at him. See that little white flag? Asked the White Rat. It's more or less that marks the spot where we are now, but the Himalayas, said Gilbert, swinging himself over the stand and tapping the other side of the globe, the Himalayas are here. And the rim of heaven, so the old stories say, is somewhere in their western parts. Unfortunately, as I was telling you, you know any details, and the area we're talking about is unimaginably large and extremely inaccessible. It gets bitterly cold by night, and by day, he added, grinning at Sorrel, by day you'd probably be perspiring heavily in that fur coat of yours. So perspiring means it's going to get very hot and very sweaty. Oh, it's a terrible long way off, murmured Ben. Indeed it is. Gilbert Greytail leaned forward and traced an invisible line on the globe. By my reckoning, your journey ought to go something like this. A fast stretch south first, then turn east. He scratched his ear. Yes, that's it. I think the southern route is best. The humans are at war with each other again in the north, and I've heard some very nasty stories about a giant. Gilbert leaned so close to the globe that his nose pressed against it. See that place? The giant is said to be at large there, in the Tenshine Mountains. No, take my word for it, continued Gilbert Greytail, shaking his head. You'd better take the southern route. You may get your fur baked in the sun, now and then, but look on the bright side. There probably won't be much rain at this time of year, and rain, he said, chuckling. I've heard that rain makes dragons melancholy. Is that right? Usually, replied Sorrel, but where we come from, they've had to get used to it. Correct. I'd forgotten. You're from the wettest part of Europe, aren't you? But let's get on with it. Gilbert gave the globe another little push. Where was I? Oh, yes. Up here, he tapped the map with his paw. I'm going to pause it there and we'll catch up from that line in our lesson on Monday.